The Ontario Reign are suddenly on the verge of elimination, and we get your thoughts on all things Kings on this Feedback Friday on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years of the Fox Sports Radio Network, also host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, it is a Kings Fan Feedback Friday. We're going to get your emails and even some YouTube comments coming up in just a bit. But first, I did want to let you know that the Ontario Reign were in action Friday night, playing in Game 2 of the Pacific Division Finals in the Calder Cup playoffs. And the Reign were on the road at the Coachella Valley Firebirds for a second straight game, down 1-0 in a best-of-5 series. Now, it was a great start for the home team, Coachella Valley, as they led 3-0 after the first period. That included a power play goal. Second period, the Reign tried to fight back. Kevin Connaught would score for Ontario, unassisted to make it 3-1, but the Firebirds responded to make it 4-1 after two periods. Third period, the Reign score again to cut it to 4-2 on a Hayden Hodgson goal. Taylor Ward and Joe Hicketts with the assists. Third period, Hayden Hodgson would score on the power play for Ontario. Coachella Valley then added their second power play goal to make it 5-3. TJ Tynan would score for the Reign again, also on the power play, but Ontario could get no closer. And despite outshooting the Firebirds 18-8 in the third period and putting 35 shots on net in the game, the Reign lose by a score of 5-3 and now trail in the series 2-0. Reign goalie Eric Portillo allowed 5 goals on 28 shots after starting the playoffs with 2 straight series wins and a postseason record of 5-0. The Reign now suddenly find themselves on the brink of elimination. So they've got a must win. Hopefully home ice can help turn this thing around. Game 3 and a potential Game 4 come up in Ontario. Game 3 is this Sunday, and a potential Game 4 will be on Friday. So the Ontario Reign, again, best-of-5 series in the Pacific Division Championship, down 2-0. Certainly not where they would like to be, but again, hopefully coming back home, they can get 2 wins, force a deciding Game 5, and then see what happens. But it's been a great season for the Ontario Reign. A couple of tough losses on the road, so hopefully again they can at least get 1 win and extend the series coming up this Sunday. We'll update you on that game coming up in our Monday episode. As for the IIHF World Championships, none of the 4 Kings that are over in the Czech Republic or Czechia had a game on Friday. All of them will be in action, though, over the weekend. Saturday, you've got Pierre Luc Dubois and Team Canada taking on Finland. Kevin Fiala and Switzerland will face Denmark. And then you've got Adrian Kempe and Carl Grundstrom taking on Latvia. Those are all Saturday games. And then on Sunday, it's Fiala against Dubois as Canada takes on Switzerland. And we'll update you on the results of those games coming up on Monday's show as well. But this is a Kings Fan Feedback Friday, your chance to talk about all things LA Kings. And probably not surprising, the great majority of the feedback that I got was about Pierre Luc Dubois. We're going to start with this, an email from Phil. He checks in from parts unknown. We don't know where Phil is from. But he said, I've heard all the explanations and excuses for the lackluster play of PLD. However, I believe the real cause is something much deeper and potentially more difficult to remedy. His mindset. This past season, I attended about 60 home games. I always go early so my grandsons and I can watch the warm-up at the glass, and I'm lucky to have seats very close to the ice. During the warm-up, as well as during the games, I have made it a habit to pay special attention to PLD. Here's what I have directly observed. During warm-up, he often stays off on his own, seemingly indifferent and estranged from the rest of the team. He sometimes does not participate in the team drills. Notably, he also hardly makes an effort to speak with or interact with other players, nor do they come up to engage with him. I've been a big hockey fan for over 50 years and realized that some players during warm-ups go off on their own to stretch or do other personal pregame rituals. But rarely have I seen the repeat lack of connection between a player and his teammates like this. Maybe they just leave him alone because he's doing his own psych up routine, but the optic of separation from the team has to strike the rest of the players as odd and self-centered. During the games, PLD often stands or very slowly coasts in one place, watching the play and not engaging. Even when the puck somehow comes near him, he does not aggressively go after it. And often when he comes down the ice with the puck and has an open shot, he doesn't take it. The one word description I would use about his behavior is disengaged. The paradoxical thing about it is that during his interviews, he seems very composed and a team oriented guy. The contradiction between this and his practice and play lead me to believe that neither has participation in the international tournament. Excuse me. Hold on a second. Let me back up here. The contradiction between this and his practice and play led me to believe that neither his participation in the international tournament nor any other physical practice or preparation will get him on track. He needs some deep psychological care. All right, that is from Phil, who has been studying closely Pierre Luc Dubois. I will say this, and I'm not disagreeing with some of your points at all, really, Phil. I certainly haven't sit there and watched Pierre Luc Dubois during warmup, maybe as you have, but I do think sometimes we watch players so closely, and I have been guilty of this a bit as well, that sometimes we look for things to kind of back up our opinion on someone. Now, maybe you went into this with a completely open mind. I don't know. But when you look for something, a lot of times you're going to find it. So I don't know. I think when you watch a player and you're expecting him not to do well, and then he does something that isn't well, then it kind of stands out more. Because look, let's be honest. Pierre Luc Dubois obviously had a bad year, and there were certainly a lot of times where it didn't look like he was going out all out like he should have. But of course, there were times when he made good plays. There were times when he was hustling, and then we just kind of forget about those things. But again, I think the problem with him, I don't know, maybe we're looking a little bit too deep into this, right? But I will say this: if that is true, if he needs psychological care, that's something that's available to him. That's something that most teams have. There are programs through the Players Association where you can get, mental help if you need it. So if there is something deeper, that is something that if he wants to, he can look into it. Or maybe if the team sees what you see, Phil, and thinks there is something more to him, needing to be more engaged with his teammates, needing to be more a part of the team, then that is something that they could, I suppose, recommend. But I will agree with one thing, and it's kind of been very interesting to me as well, is that when he is interviewed, he does say a lot of the right things. I don't know if it's a con job or I don't know. I don't know him well enough to have kind of figured him out, but yeah, he is definitely being analyzed by everyone. Maybe sometimes he's overanalyzed a little bit. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I can't blame anybody for trying to figure out Pierre Luc Dubois because we're all trying to figure out Pierre Luc Dubois. This comes from Travis in Tucson. He says, I'm not going to defend PLD in any way. He was arguably the most disappointing player in the NHL this season. Whether we like it or not, he's going to be a King next season. All we can hope for is that he bounces back. One thing I don't think is being talked about enough with regards to a PLD trade is that the Kings are not developing centers. Kempe, Velarde, Byfield, Turcotte, all drafted as centers. Outside of Turcotte in the minors, none have been playing that position. Kempe is clearly now a wing, and while Q is still young and has vocalized he wants to move back to center, we're not sure if that's happening. Kopitar can't be the number one center forever, and Phil is clearly best slotted as the number 3 center. In theory, the Kings traded for PLD to eventually become the number 1 center or possibly the 2C if Byfield becomes a star. It looks like each may be best at left wing. This is another problem going forward. While I agree that they have to put PLD in a position to succeed, someone has to step up at the center position, whether it's him, Q, Turcotte, or someone else. As much as I like Blake Lizotte, I don't want to rely on him being more than a role player. I think it's a great point, Travis. I know our friend Austin Stanovich has talked about this a lot in some of his writings, that it looks like the Kings at this point, as great as Andre Kopitar's career has been, is he truly a number one center at this point? It kind of looks like the Kings are a team that has three number two centers, right? With Kopitar, Deneau, and Pierre Luc Dubois. So somebody's got to play that 1C position, and I'm sure it's going to continue to be Andre Kopitar. Not only has Quentin Byfield talked about moving back to center, but Rob Blake has talked about that as well. I think ultimately, yes, they do feel that Quentin Byfield will need to move back to center. But as we know, Kopitar, Deneau, and Pierre Luc Dubois certainly are all under contract for not just next season, but multiple seasons after that. I think Deneau 2 more seasons, Kopitar 2 more seasons, and maybe Deneau just 1. But I think you bring up a good point that at some point, Quentin Byfield's going to have to find a place to play at that center position. So when is that going to happen? It doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon at this point. But he is still developing into an NHL player, so I don't know that there's a rush necessarily for that at some point. But it always has seemed like the plan was for Quentin Byfield to eventually replace Andre Kopitar and for Brant Clark to eventually replace Drew Doughty. So at what point does that happen? Certainly it's not next season. It still looks like it's a couple of seasons down the road, if not at that point. We've got more of your emails coming up here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to the NBA, NHL, or whatever sport you're into. I have bought tickets using Gametime to NFL and NHL games, and I am a satisfied customer. The app is easy to use and navigate. Just go on, tap the listings, sports, music, shows, and the list of tickets with the best deals, including our own Ontario Reign, if you want to check them out in the playoffs. When you search for tickets, the search or event is saved. So when you go back on the app, it's there for you as that event gets closer, and you can see how the prices go up or down. My favorite feature is the panoramic view you see from the seat you want to buy, so you know the exact view you're going to get before you buy it. And you get the lowest price guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We have this from Gary. He is also in Parts Unknown. And he says, I ask you and all Kings fans, specifically the season ticket holders, to get together and have a major meeting or a protest to save the Kings from Rob Blake and Luc Robitaille, who are completely destroying this organization. Buy out PLD before the summer, and the firing of Blake and Luc needs to be done immediately. All right. There's a lot of people out there who want Rob Blake and Luc Robitaille to be fired, and a lot of people who want Pierre Luc Dubois to be traded or bought out. It certainly doesn't look like that's going to happen. I would be surprised if there was some sort of mass meeting or boycott from Kings season ticket holders, although that certainly would have an impact on things. I think back to when the Dodgers were owned by Frank McCourt and how Dodgers fans kind of banded together to kind of stop going to games, as far as I remember. And eventually it led to Frank McCourt selling the team. So while it's rare, look, as a customer, you're allowed to speak your mind on the product that you are investing in by not being a part of it anymore. I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm just saying that's your choice as a consumer, as a customer. And if there was some sort of mass protest or a large group of season ticket holders saying we're not going to renew because we're unsatisfied with what's going on with the team, that can have an impact. But most people love going to the games, and they're dissatisfied with the product to some extent, even though they did make the playoffs. But a lot of fans, they don't want to take that step, but ultimately it is possible if you can do that, but it's pretty rare. Jeremiah and Hawthorne says, I'm actually surprised Rob Blake is allowed to find our next head coach. Why hasn't he signed Byfield yet? I'm telling you, we can't lose Byfield, because if we lose another piece for our future, then the Kings have no one to replace Kopitar. Jeremiah, I know you're a huge Quentin Byfield fan. I think we all love Q. I don't think you have anything to worry about. As I've said, I think re-signing Quentin Byfield is the Kings' number one priority. He is the future, as you have said, to replace Andrei Kopitar or whatever the role might be going forward. But they're going to get a deal done with Quentin Byfield. If not, then I may join all those people in the protest of Rob Blake, because as bad as things have gotten, there's no way that they can allow something like that to happen and not secure him in some way, bridge deal, or if they can lock him up long term. But at some point, like I said, he's the future of the franchise, so they're gonna get that done. I don't think you have to worry about that. Edwin in Brea loves to talk about goaltending, and he's going to do that with this email. But he starts by saying, "I just want to say first off, I have no issue with our players playing overseas. It's a great honor to play for your country. Let our players win a world championship or a medal, because the Kings aren't winning a Stanley Cup anytime soon." Ooh, a little shot there. To my main point, goaltending. For the Kings to have the upgrade they need a new starter. Cam Talbot is serviceable. However, Father Time has caught up with him, and he is more of a backup. I like David Riddick. He is a serviceable backup. He can play around 25 games. He has a great coverage of the net, long wingspan, long arms and legs. To me, he should have been our starter against the Oilers. I expect Phoenix Copley to return on a rehab deal with the Reign and another season with Bartolo too. So my three goalies I think the Kings should consider. He says 2 trades and 1 as a free agent. My top choice is Nashville's UC Saros. He would make us instant contenders. My second choice would be Carolina's Frederik Andersen. And at $3 million, he has experience and would give us a solid netminder. And also Pittsburgh's Alex Nedeljkovic, solid goalie at 28 years old, would be a great fit for the Kings. And then he goes on to trash talk me about the Chargers-Steelers game that I'm going to in Pittsburgh this season. I'm a Steelers fan. My wife's a Chargers fan. And Edwin is a Chargers fan as well. Edwin, though, honestly, a Chargers fan trash talking a Steelers fan, that's, I don't know, it's like a Clippers fan trash talking a Lakers fan. It's kind of silly. But seriously, to get to your comments about the goaltending, UC Saros, I did see that of active goalies, his career numbers in the playoffs, not so good, although I am a fan of his, and I think Nashville is looking to move off of him because they've got a young goaltender waiting in the wings. As far as Frederik Andersen, I thought he was less than impressive in the series against the Rangers for Carolina. He's okay, and he's certainly younger than Cam Talbot. Not saying he wouldn't be an upgrade if there's a reasonable price there. I guess so. Alex Nedeljkovic, though, I don't believe he was even the number 1 in Pittsburgh this year. So he is young, and he was a almost rookie of the year when he was in Carolina. But I mean, all those guys are okay. I don't know that they're huge upgrades from Cam Talbot, but they're certainly younger. And I would say maybe a half step up from those guys. Is that enough to boost the Kings in that position, especially if the Kings are going to change their strategy and be a more offensive team? I don't know. We shall see. UC Saros, I think, is an intriguing option potentially for the LA Kings. We shall see. But they would have to obviously make a trade with Nashville, and what are they going to give up to get UC Saros? There's not a lot there on the cupboard to send the other way. We're going to get into some YouTube comments on the show. We haven't done that in a while. We'll do that next year on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. So we have gotten through all of our emails for this week, so I did want to grab a few comments from our fine YouTube viewers. This comes from General Lee Concepts, who is a very frequent commenter on the YouTube episodes, which we greatly appreciate. And he, I assume it's a he, says, I feel really bad, as it appears Kings management has chosen to simply ignore its fans and podcasters and just float without a rudder through the next season. But their inaction is likely to begin the latter phases of their failed rebuild. It's fair to say the Kings rarely win any top draft picks, although they did get one number 2 since 2014. Maybe it's true a team needs to win a few top picks before they can do anything. And I think what the general is getting at here, and I agree with him, the Kings are in a very difficult spot right now. They're not terrible, obviously. Terrible teams don't make the playoffs, but they're clearly also not good enough to do anything once they get there. Maybe they get out of the first round, maybe, at some point. But right now, based on what we're seeing, if you've watched any of the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, as I have, you're like, man, the Kings are nowhere close to the hockey these teams are playing. So the position they're in, they're not terrible enough to get a really good draft pick, and they're not good enough to do anything in the playoffs. So they're right there in that middle ground. They're in that what is it? Not quite hell, not quite heaven, right? So yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, and that's where the Kings are at this point. So, they went through the rebuild not long ago. Got some decent parts going forward, but it is a difficult position to be in when you're in that limbo where you're just, you're not good enough to do anything in the playoffs, but you're not terrible. So you're not going to get one of those top 10 picks or something like that. So that's a difficult spot to be in, but that's where the Kings are. This comes from Michael V, 1986. And he says, what a mess Blake and Luc has created for the Kings. There is really no good options with Pierre Luc Dubois. Buying him out is a financial nightmare. To keep him is a trap. He has to be put in the top 6 to be more productive, but he won't have earned it. And that sends a terrible message to the other players. That's exactly why Todd McClellan and Jim Hiller demoted him, because they don't want a cancer like PLD getting rewarded for his night in and night out terrible effort. Blake and Luc must be fired. Ownership is totally spineless and are an embarrassment for not having the balls to fire both Luc and Blake. You can't require players to be accountable and not require the same accountability to management as well. Period. Yeah, I know that's certainly what I said when we talked about the end of the season press conference for Rob Blake and Luc Robitaille. It seemed like there was just no accountability there whatsoever. You can't talk big going into a season that we've got to do this and we've got to do that, and then you don't do it, and then nothing really changes. I mean, how do you look at your fans with a straight face and say some of the things that they said? So yeah, I hear you. We did have some folks chime in on some potential head coaching candidates for the LA Kings. This is Red Monkey 24 or Red Monkeys 24. Says, not sure why Gerard Gallant isn't getting talked about more as a candidate. Seems like a great fit. Players love him, and he has playoff success. That's a name I have not heard much of, Gerard Gallant. He certainly has had success in different places, probably for Kings fans most notably with the Vegas Golden Knights. And he's certainly out there and available, but I have not heard his name come up. He's a veteran guy who's been around. Seems like one of those guys, though, that kind of wears out his welcome kind of quickly. But he's somebody who comes in. I'll say this: he is not afraid to speak his mind and to do what he's going to do. And sometimes that does rub management the wrong way, and that's probably why he's bounced around a bit. New York, Carolina, but he has had success pretty much wherever he's gone. So that is an interesting name to bring up. And this comes from Robert Bugner, 8820. And he says, the search should start with David Carl, young, highly successful everywhere he's been, and coaches an aggressive defensive game while pushing the pace offensively. Rob Blake should do everything in his power to hire him. Full stop. If you don't know who David Carl is, I think he's an intriguing coaching candidate. He's a college coach, and you don't see a lot of that in the NHL. You see it in the NFL. You see it in the NBA a lot more frequently. But it does happen occasionally in the NHL. David Carl is the current head coach of the University of Denver. He's been there 6 years. He's won 2 national titles, including this past season. He coached the U.S. to gold in the World Junior Championships in 2024. So he has an impressive resume. You might remember his brother, Matt Carl, played for the San Jose Sharks and a few other teams back in the day. So there are a few examples of college coaches recently coming in the NHL. Dave Haxtell was first in Philadelphia and just most recently in Seattle. He was been fired in both places, but he was a very successful college coach at North Dakota. And Jim Montgomery, who's currently the head coach in Boston. He'd been in Dallas as well. He was at the University of Denver before David Carl was there and has, had decent success. So I will say that's not a name I've heard associated with many jobs this season, but a very successful younger coach that I think would be a good candidate for an NHL job. Whether the Kings will be looking to do that, I don't know. I don't know that the Kings have ever hired a college coach to be their head coach. You might remember Andy Murray was a coach of the Kings who had some success. They actually hired him out of high school. He was coaching a prep school, I think in Minnesota. I want to say Shattuck St. Mary's was the name of it, or was that the high school that LeBron James went to? I think he went to St. Mary's too. Anyway, I'm rambling. They hired Andy Murray out of high school. I think Sidney Crosby played for him in prep school. Anyway, he was decent. And then after the Kings fired him, I believe he went to coach in college. Anyway, that's not a route that the Kings have typically taken, but I like the suggestion. It's an outside the box kind of suggestion, but that is a name of a younger up and coming coach that keep an eye on. But let's be honest, I'd be shocked if the Kings went out and did something kind of creative like that. I would be surprised. Hey, thank you to everyone who took the time to send an email or to comment on the YouTube episodes. Really appreciate it. This kind of episode is not possible without your participation. So thank you for that. If you want to send an email for a future show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, comment in the comment section below. All those comments, the likes, the subscriptions, whatever, those all help the show to be found by people that are just kind of roaming around YouTube, which is what I do a lot of, just kind of looking for content. And if you like and subscribe and you add comments, it helps the algorithm for people to find the show. So we appreciate that as well. So if you want to stay interactive with us on social media, we are on X, Twitter. We are on Instagram at Locked On LA Kings. For you everydayers, those that listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Monday's show, as I mentioned, we'll recap how the Ontario Reign do in their must-win playoff game on Sunday. We'll update you on all the World Championship stats and numbers and results involving those 4 LA Kings players that are playing there, and any other Kings-related news that comes out over the weekend. Will we see a coach hired next week? That is certainly something that we were interested in. And we saw David Riddick get signed, the first player to be re-signed in the offseason for the Kings. Will we see more signings coming up next week? If we do, we'll certainly be here to talk about it. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.